Have you ever found yourself staring at your phone late at night, wondering if your avoidant ex even misses you? Let alone regrets losing you? It's like they walked away and never looked back, while you're left sitting in the wreckage of what used to be, replaying every moment and trying to understand what went wrong. You gave so much, you stayed even when they pulled away, and now you're questioning if any of it meant anything to them at all. The silence on their end feels unbearable, not just because they're gone, but because they seem so fine without you. Hi, I'm Jim Rowan, and today I want to speak directly to the part of you that's stuck in the aftermath of loving someone who couldn't meet you emotionally. If you've ever wondered, when will they finally realize what they lost? You're not alone, and you're not overreacting. You're responding to emotional abandonment. The truth is, when you've been in a relationship with an avoidant partner, their detachment doesn't stop when the relationship ends. It continues, but so does your confusion, your craving for closure, and that lingering hope that someday, somehow, they'll regret letting you go. In this video, I'm going to take you through the psychology of avoidance step by step. I'll walk you through a month-by-month timeline, what avoidants typically feel right after the breakup, when regret starts to creep in, and, most importantly, why none of that determines your worth. You'll learn why their initial calm isn't real closure, and why the regret, if it ever comes, often arrives too late. And I'll show you how to stop waiting for them to wake up and start waking yourself up instead. So, if you're tired of replaying the past, of shrinking your needs to fit someone else's avoidance, and you're ready to reclaim your peace and your power, hit that subscribe button. This is the space where we stop chasing clarity from others and start creating it within. You don't have to stay stuck in emotional limbo. You deserve a love that shows up. Let's get into it. Let's start with what happens right after the breakup, months 0 to 2. This is the phase where things often feel the most emotionally lopsided. While you're probably sitting with pain, confusion, or even guilt, the avoidant ex often appears to be thriving. It can feel like whiplash. They might be going out more, posting smiling selfies, or acting like nothing ever happened. And you're left asking yourself, how can they move on so easily? Did I mean anything to them at all? But here's the thing, you need to understand, this is their coping mechanism. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, intimacy often feels overwhelming. Being emotionally close makes them feel exposed or even trapped. So, when the relationship ends, they don't feel grief the same way an anxiously attached person does. Instead, what they often feel is relief. Relief that they no longer have to deal with emotional intensity, conflict, or vulnerability. It doesn't mean they didn't care. It means caring became too emotionally risky for them to manage. Think of it like this. Imagine someone who's been holding their breath underwater during the entire relationship. They didn't know how to swim through emotions safely, so when the breakup happens, it's like finally coming up for air. Of course, they look calm, they can breathe again, but that calmness, it's not peace, it's avoidance. It's emotional escape. Let me give you a real-life example. One client I worked with, we'll call her Sarah. was dating a guy who would pull away every time things got emotionally close. He'd go silent after serious talks, withdraw when she asked for clarity, and constantly needed space. After their breakup, she was devastated. Meanwhile, he was traveling, posting pictures from road trips, and acting like he was living his best life. She kept asking, "How is he not hurting like I am?" What she didn't see was that he wasn't healing, he was escaping. And while it looked like he'd moved on, all he'd really done was push pause on his emotions. It's incredibly hard not to take this personally. You gave your heart and now you feel discarded, but it's not that simple. Avoidants don't usually process breakups right away because they delay emotional pain. They compartmentalize, distract, or rationalize the loss. Their calm is more like emotional paralysis. And if you chase them during this phase, texting, checking in, trying to get closure, you're not going to pull them closer. You're just reinforcing the dynamic where you're always the one reaching and they're always retreating. That's why no contact during this time is so important, not just for them, but for you. It gives you space to stop trying to decode their behavior and start reconnecting with your own reality. You're allowed to grieve, you're allowed to feel, and you don't need to match their numbness with silence of your own. You need to heal in a way that makes you whole again, not small, not ashamed, and not waiting for someone who isn't emotionally present. In the next phase, things start to shift, just not always in the way you think. So stay with me. Now let's move into months 2 to 4, where things start to shift in subtle but important ways. This is the phase where your avoidant ex might not be openly reaching out, but under the surface, they're beginning to feel unsettled. See, during the relationship, chances are you were the one who kept things together. You soothed conflict. You made the first moves to repair things. You reassured. You overfunctioned. And even if they didn't say it out loud, your avoidant ex expected that pattern to continue after the breakup. Here's what most people don't realize. Avoidants are used to being pursued. It makes them feel safe in a backwards kind of way. You might be thinking, wait, doesn't chasing make them pull away? Yes, it does. But paradoxically, the existence of that chase still confirms something important for them. It tells them, I'm in control, I matter, I'm desirable. So when you go quiet, truly quiet, not silent, but watching their Instagram stories, kind of quiet, it confuses them. It shakes their inner framework. And for the first time, they start wondering, why aren't you doing what you always did? This is when cognitive dissonance begins to creep in. Cognitive dissonance is that mental discomfort people feel when their beliefs don't match up with reality. Your avoidant ex may have believed they'll never leave me, or they need me more than I need them. But now you're not reaching out. You're not chasing, and that creates friction. It doesn't mean they're feeling regret yet, not fully. But it does mean they're starting to notice the gap between what they expected and what's actually happening. Let me give you an example. A client of mine, we'll call him Jason, broke up with his girlfriend who was more anxiously attached. During their time together, she always made the effort. After the breakup, she decided to go completely no contact, not to manipulate, but to heal. 2 months in, Jason started texting mutual friends, asking what she was up to. He didn't reach out directly, but he became visibly unsettled. Why? Because the silence didn't fit the story he'd told himself that she'd always be there waiting. The absence of the chase disturbed him more than he expected. And this is where your power lies, not in making them miss you on purpose, but in no longer needing to overextend for someone who didn't meet you halfway. By not chasing you, communicate something quietly but powerfully. I respect myself too much to keep playing this role. That message hits different. It breaks the emotional cycle not out of spite, but out of self-respect. I know it's hard. I know every instinct in your body wants to fix what's broken. But let this phase remind you your value isn't tied to how much you can hold a relationship together. It's in how you show up for yourself when the other person can't or won't. Stay grounded, because we're about to head into the next phase, the turning point, where the avoidance emotional defenses start to crack. Now we're stepping into months 4 to 6, and this is where the emotional weather really starts to change for your avoidant ex. Up until now, they've likely been coasting, distracting themselves, leaning into their independence, maybe even dating around or throwing themselves into work or hobbies. But something starts to shift when they notice that you're not frozen in time anymore. You're not stuck in the same place emotionally. You're growing, healing, showing signs of moving on. And even if you're not trying to show that off, believe me, they notice. Avoidants aren't always good at showing emotion, but that doesn't mean they're not observing. They're often very attuned to subtle shifts, especially when it involves someone they were once close to. So when you stop orbiting around them and start investing in yourself, something inside them clicks. They might see a new post of you smiling, hear from a friend that you've started dating again, or simply realize you've disappeared from their radar. And that realization plants a seed. It's the seed of doubt. Did I really make the right decision? What if I misjudged what we had? This is where comparisons start to sneak in. They might be out with someone new, but they're starting to see that not everyone will tolerate the same emotional distance you once did. Maybe that new person sets firmer boundaries. Maybe there's less chemistry. Maybe the comfort they took for granted with you just isn't there anymore. And for the first time, they start to feel the consequences of how they handled things. It's not full-blown regret just yet, but it's close. It's the early stage where the choices they made begin to weigh heavier than expected. Let me give you a real-world example. A client of mine named Rachel had an avoidant ex who broke things off because he needed space. She didn't beg or plead. Instead, she leaned hard into her healing therapy exercise, reconnecting with friends. Around the 5-month mark, her ex started randomly liking her old photos, even commented on a story. He hadn't said a word for months. Why the sudden attention? Because he could see she wasn't waiting around. She looked peaceful. She looked free. That messed with his image of her as the one who'd always be available. This is the time when avoidants often find themselves emotionally caught off guard. The distance they once craved now feels like a loss. And because they're not used to handling emotional discomfort, well, this can trigger anxiety. They may start reaching out in small, indirect ways, testing the waters without committing. You might get a "hey, just checking in" message or see that they're lurking on your social media. These are signs they're starting to process the breakup in a more honest way. But again, this doesn't mean they've changed. So during this phase, your job is not to lean in and rescue. It's to keep doing what you've been doing, growing, honoring yourself, and holding the boundary that says, if you want back in, it takes more than curiosity, it takes consistency. Because this is the chapter where the avoidant begins to understand what they lost, but whether they do something about it is another story. That brings us to the next phase when regret hits for real. Stay tuned. Now we're entering the final phase of the avoidant regret timeline, month 6 and beyond. And this is where things start to get very real, very fast. Up to this point, your avoidant ex may have been able to distract themselves, rationalize the breakup, or convince themselves that they made the right choice. But distraction only works for so long. Eventually, the emotional wall they built starts to crack. The silence becomes loud, and for the first time, they feel the full weight of what they've lost. This is where true regret begins to show up. Not the casual kind like, "oh, I wonder how they're doing," but the deep sinking kind. The kind that makes them realize they didn't just lose a person, they lost someone who genuinely showed up. Someone who tried, who cared, who loved them through the difficult parts. And for avoidants who struggle to receive emotional closeness without feeling smothered, this realization can be incredibly overwhelming. It often hits all at once, emotional flooding. And they don't have the emotional tools to handle it. Think about it like this. Imagine avoiding all the hard feelings for months, telling yourself you're fine, convincing yourself you're better off. And then suddenly, you see a picture of them smiling with someone new, or you realize it's been half a year and you haven't felt that kind of emotional connection with anyone else. Boom, it hits. And it hits hard. That's what emotional flooding looks like for avoidants. They get swamped by everything they've been trying not to feel. I had a client, let's call him Dan, who was avoidantly attached and ended a relationship with a woman who deeply cared for him. She respected his need for space, didn't chase, and quietly moved on. Around the 8-month mark, Dan suddenly reached out. Not just a simple text, but a full message dump. How much he missed her, how he realized he took her for granted, how he hadn't found anyone else who understood him like she did. He was spiraling. The same man who once needed freedom was now panicking that he'd lost someone irreplaceable. If something like this happens to you, it can be so tempting to rush in and comfort them. After all, this is what you've been waiting for, right? That moment when they finally get it. But here's where I want you to pause. Because regret isn't the same as change. Just because they finally feel something doesn't mean they're ready to show up differently. It doesn't mean they've done the emotional work or that they're suddenly capable of giving you the kind of connection you need. You have to ask yourself, are they reaching out because they truly want to grow with me? Or are they just overwhelmed by their own feelings and reaching for something familiar? It's okay to feel flattered. It's okay to still care. But don't let temporary regret pull you back into a dynamic that made you feel small. This phase is powerful, not because they finally regret it, but because you get to decide how to respond. And that's where your healing becomes your strength. Stay with me, because next we'll talk about what to do if they come back and how to protect your peace either way. Here's where we shift the focus back to you, because as much as we've broken down the avoidant timeline, I want you to hear this clearly. You can't control how or if they feel regret. This timeline is a general pattern, not a promise. Some avoidant exes may experience deep regret and reach out months later. Others, they might never look back. And it's not because you weren't valuable. It's not because you didn't matter. It's because emotional growth requires awareness, and not everyone is ready or willing to go there. This is why it's so important to come back to your own reality. If you stay fixated on when they'll regret it, you end up pressing pause on your healing. You sit in limbo watching the calendar, wondering, is this the month they finally feel it? But healing doesn't happen by waiting for someone else's light bulb moment. It happens when you accept that their timeline is not your responsibility. Take my client Jenna, for example. Her avoidant ex never reached out, not even after a year. For a long time, she thought maybe he just needs more time. But the truth was, he wasn't emotionally available before, and he wasn't interested in changing that after. What helped Jenna move forward wasn't his regret. It was finally realizing, I deserve more than breadcrumbs. I deserve someone who chooses me on purpose. That's the clarity I want for you. Regret is their journey. Healing is yours. Let go of the need for their realization and come home to your own. You don't need someone to wake up to your worth. You just need to stop sleeping on it yourself. You're not hard to love. You were just trying to love someone who wasn't ready. Now, let's talk about what it looks like to respond from a secure lens. Because when you've been in a relationship with an avoidant partner, it's easy to fall into the trap of waiting. Waiting for the text. Waiting for them to miss you. Waiting for them to realize they messed up. But someone with a secure attachment style doesn't live in that kind of emotional limbo. They don't build their peace on someone else's potential regret. Instead, they deal with what is not what might be. A secure person says, this relationship didn't meet my emotional needs, and I'm allowed to walk away from that. They don't chase clarity from someone who's already shown they can't provide it. They don't try to force connection where there's emotional avoidance. And when faced with inconsistency or emotional distance, they don't beg for closeness. They set boundaries, not to punish the other person, but to protect their own well-being. Let me share an example. One of my clients, Marcus, had been seeing a woman with strong avoidant tendencies. She'd pull away any time he tried to deepen the relationship. After months of trying to be patient, he finally reached a breaking point. Instead of exploding or ghosting, he calmly said, I care about you, but I need a relationship where emotional intimacy is mutual. If you're not in a place to offer that, I understand, but I won't keep overextending myself. That's what secure communication looks like. Clear, respectful, and rooted in self-worth. You don't need to be cold or unkind to hold your ground. You just need to stop abandoning yourself to keep someone else comfortable. Speak your truth, not to convince them, but to claim you. That's the power of secure communication, and it's available to you right now. Here's the truth I want you to leave with. You did everything you could. You showed up. You loved fully. You gave your best effort in a relationship that was emotionally uneven. And if that effort was met with distance, silence, or avoidance, it doesn't mean you weren't enough. It means their capacity to receive love and build connection was limited. That's not your fault, and it's not your job to fix. So many people walk away from relationships with avoidant partners feeling like they failed, like if they had just been more patient, more understanding, or less needy, it would have worked out. But let me remind you, you were asking for the bare minimum: emotional presence, consistency, and effort. You weren't asking too much. You were just asking someone who couldn't give it. That's not a reflection of your value. That's a reflection of where they're at emotionally. Take Ollie, for example. She spent a year in a situationship with a guy who kept pulling away any time things got serious. She constantly second-guessed herself, wondering, am I pushing too hard? Should I just give him more space? Eventually, she hit her limit. She walked away, and a few months later, he came back saying all the right things, but still unwilling to make a real change. And that's when it clicked for her. I don't want to be with someone who only shows up once I'm gone. You deserve someone who is ready, not someone who wakes up 6 months too late, filled with regret but still emotionally unavailable. Let that be your standard moving forward. Don't wait for regret to validate your worth. Choose yourself now, because the right person won't need to lose you to realize your value. They'll recognize it and rise to meet you while you're still there. Let's wrap this up with the most important truth of all: this timeline isn't something you wait on like a delayed flight. It's not here so you can count the days until your avoidant ex regrets losing you. It's here as a reflection tool, a way to understand their emotional patterns so you can finally stop blaming yourself for their distance and start freeing yourself from it. Throughout this video, we explored how avoidants typically process breakups, the initial relief, the confusion when you don't chase the slow, creeping realization of loss, and finally the flood of regret if they ever get there. And, as we said, some do. Many don't. But your healing can't be tethered to their growth. Because the real shift, the one that actually changes your life, isn't about their regret at all. It's about you choosing not to abandon yourself anymore. You showed up with love, consistency, and effort. That already says everything about who you are. Now the work is about aligning with that same level of love for yourself. Setting boundaries, letting go with grace, rebuilding your sense of worth from the inside out. That's what healing through the secure lens looks like, not waiting, reclaiming. So if this resonated with you, I want to say thank you truly for watching. Your time, your attention, your heart all matter, and you deserve support that helps you rise, not keep you stuck. If you found value in this, Please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more videos like this where we untangle relationship dynamics and walk you back home to yourself. And drop a comment below to share your story or thoughts. I read every single one. This is your space to be heard, validated, and reminded you're not alone. You're worthy of secure, lasting love. And it starts with how you love you. Let's keep healing together.